Hey there YouTube, Tristan Blaze back again. Another Legacy deck tech. Here we go with Eldrazi Stompy, which is taken off in both Legacy and Modern. However, with some recent bannings, it's probably not going to be as good in Modern as it can possibly be in Legacy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the deck. Starting off, we have our Prison Elements, Chalice of the Void, Thorn of Amethyst, 4 copies each. Now, like decks like Mud, decks like White Stacks, there's a little bit of a Prison element involved in this, but unlike Mud, unlike White Stacks, after you drop Chalice and Thorn, you can follow it up with some very credible threats. We then have 1 Dismember, 3 Warping Whales. Now, Warping Whale itself, well, Dismember obviously can just take down, creatures. Warping Whale serves as a multi-tool, kind of. We can exile 1 power or 1 toughness creatures. So, various cards in Elf deck, or, say, Deathrite Shaman for many things. Unflipped Delver of Secrets, Stoneforge Mystic, various, Sadialo, calm down. Various creatures like that can easily just be exiled. On top of that, we get to counter target sorcery spell. Some various cards, maybe Toxic Deluge, maybe, I don't know, Show and Tell possibly. Equipment. You can run, I've seen various decks online where they're running, Batterskull, Umezawa's Jit. I myself have chosen Umezawa's Jit over anything else. It's relatively cheap. It can be pulled off of a Matter Reshaper if it's on the top of your deck. I like the fact that I could also gain a little bit of life off of it because I also am running some lands that cause me damage. So now we're going to go into the creature base. We have 2 copies of Endbringer. Endbringer I prefer for 2 reasons. 1, additional card drawing, and 2, the ability that I can have target creature unable to attack or block. Target creature can't attack or block. So, against maybe a Show and Tell deck or a Reanimator deck, your opponent brings in Grizzlebrand. Sure, they could draw the cards, but they can't attack with them, which could help you. Now, the ability to just tap deal 1 damage, target creature or player, will eventually come into play, but being able to basically just tap out for 2 colorless and then just tap this guy and then say, okay, or sorry, tap 1 colorless. No, get off the cards, buddy. And then tap this guy and then say, yeah, your best creature can't block, I find to be relatively good. Plus the fact that it untaps every turn, my turn and my opponent's turn, gives me the ability to prevent a creature from attacking on 1 turn, prevent a creature from blocking on the other turn. So I can attack through something and then make sure that thing can't block, which I love. Reality Smasher, your 5/5 trample haste for 5, which, if it is the target of a spell, not a spell or ability, just a spell that your opponent controls, that player has to discard a card or the spell is countered. Then we have our Thought-Knot Seer, which is similar to Mesmeric Fiend or Tidehollow Sculler, and when it comes into play, you look at your opponent's hand, you choose a non-land card, and you exile it. Unlike Mesmeric Fiend or Tidehollow Sculler, when it leaves play, when it leaves the battlefield, when it leaves play, they draw a card. They don't get the exiled card back. So chances are you exile the best card in their hand, and Thought-Knot Seer promptly then dies. They're probably not going to get that card back. They're probably not going to draw that. Now, Matter Reshaper. 3/2 for 3. When Matter Reshaper dies, reveal the top card of your library. You may put that card into play if it's a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less. Otherwise, you put it into your hand. So, right off the bat, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a card at the very least when it dies. If it's a permanent with a mana cost 3 or less, you can put it into play, which means you can flip a Jit, a Thorn, you could flip a Chalice, flip an Eldrazi Mimic, flip an Endless One, flip any of your lands. As long as you flip something that is a permanent with a mana cost of 3 or less, you can drop it into play. I've tested it where I've gone, turn 1, Chalice at 1, and then turn 2, Matter Reshaper, only to then have to block, have it die, and then flip Thorn of Amethyst and bring it into play. So it is either going to be card advantage in the sense where you draw, or it's going to be a board advantage where you can accelerate your mana, you can have another creature come into play, you can have a permanent like Thorn of Amethyst or Umezawa's Jit just boom right off the top into play. So it's a good card. It's not the best card, but it's a really good card. Now we have Eldrazi Mimic. Whenever another colorless creature, not an Eldrazi, just a colorless creature comes into play, you have the option to change the Mimic's power and toughness to that creature's power and toughness until the end of turn. So it's basically like a variable clone, you could say. It just basically clones the power and toughness until the end of turn, which is relatively good if you drop something like a Reality Smasher. It automatically becomes a 5/5 now. And then our Endless One comes into play with X/1/1 counters. This could be very, very just. This could end up being more powerful than Emrakul, or this could just be, say, like a 6/6. It all depends on what you cast it for. It all depends on what you have the ability to do. But this is a very, very, I would basically say it's a very, very amazing card. Like, if you have, like, an Eye of Ugin in play, you could, and, like, 3 of these in your hand, like, yeah, your opener, you could drop 3 2/2s, or, you could save it and then, drop, say, a 6/6 a few turns later. So it all depends on what you need to do, what you're facing, various things that come up in between a deck in a specific match. So it all depends on that. Me, normally, I'm just going to create some really massively powerful dude. Okay, no. Get down, kitty. Moving on to the mana, we have our Sol lands, we have our ancient... Hi. We have our Sol lands, 4 Ancient Tombs, 4 Eldrazi Temples, 4 Crystal Veins. Hey, buddy, calm down. You want to say hi? Say hi. No. Over here. Alright, now the Tombs are going to deal you 2 damage every time you tap them. Temples get to add 2 to spend on a colorless Eldrazi spell or the activated abilities of colorless Eldrazi. So it works with your Endbringers. So you can just tap it, boom, draw a card. Right there. Crystal Vein. Most players are going to be running City of Traders. I don't own City of Traders, so I basically just proxied up. I basically just made some proxy City of Traders. I grabbed 4 basic planes. I then said I dubbed these City of Trader, and we were going to see how you work out. I found that for the most part, if I was playing a deck with City of Traders, the City of Traders was going to stay in play. Hi, Pounce. Come back here. Come back here. I found that City was going to stay in play normally about 1 to 2 turns. And that was going to be it. Then I would have to play another land, and it just wasn't really. To me, it wasn't worth spending an extra $400 to grab for land. Crystal Vein is not, to me, it's not really a budgetary replacement. You could view it as such. To me, it's more of a replacement that gives me options. I have the ability to just tap it for colorless or sack it for 2 colorless, which is why I like it. And of course, I had to go the old school Mirage block Crystal Vein. I couldn't go with that 6th edition white border crap either. Had to go with the old school stuff. Cavern of Souls comes into play. You name Eldrazi. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Spend this mana to cast a creature of the chosen type, and that creature spell can't be countered. Now, here's the problem. Notice all the Eldrazi. They're all colorless. They are all colorless. And Cavern of Souls says add 1 mana of any color. Colorless is not a color. You have to choose a color. So say red, blue, green, whatever. You use it for the generic cost. So like the generic cost on Endless One, Eldrazi Mimic, the 2 generic on Matter Reshaper, 3 generic for Thought Knot, 4 generic, and 5 generic for these guys. You use it for the generic cost, not the colorless cost. And that's how you can work it in. If you don't know it like that, that's how you do it. Eye of Ugin. Colorless Eldrazi spells cost 2 less to cast. Now this goes for Eldrazi, like, tribal sorceries, like All Is Dust. If you run All Is Dust, it's going to cost 2 less to cast. And considering the entire deck is colorless, why not? If, you want to run it, run it. If not, that's up to you. The 7 mana tap, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. That may come about at one point in time. It may not. It just depends on how the game's unfolding. It's there. You have the option. I've rarely, even in testing the deck, I've rarely had to do it. Rarely had to do it. And then most of the time when I ever did do it, I just ran right to an Endbringer and then just started just draw a card, draw a card, draw a card, and then just buried whatever, and then just would just bury my testing opponent in just the amount of cards I would draw. Speaking of more card advantage, we have Seagate Wreckage. The Library of Eldrazi. Add 1 colorless to your pool, or 2 and a colorless, tap, draw a card. Activate if you have no cards in hand. Understand where it said activate if you have no cards in hand, not you may only draw a card if you have no cards in hand. So what does that actually mean? It means, and it's similar to Library of Alexandria, where you can activate 1, put the ability on the stack, then activate the other one, put that ability on the stack. So you have 2 abilities, and the only thing it checks is did you activate them with 0 cards in your hand. It's not do you have no cards in hand, but did the activation occur with 0 cards in hand. So technically, if you have no cards in hand, both of these in play, you can draw 2 cards in a very technical sense, but you have to stipulate how to do this, and you have to tell your opponent, I'm going to put this on the stack, hold priority, now activate this and do this and that. So there's a lot of rules and stack tricks involved with doing it, but I have it there just for additional card advantage. And these 3 beautiful full art wastes. Why I'm not running Mishra's Factory, why I'm not running Wasteland or any other colorless mana source is relatively simple. This is a rather mana hungry deck. Even if you're running City of Traders versus Crystal Vein, you are going to be losing land eventually. Running 3 Wastelands, you're just losing 3 more land. Okay? Because you're going to be like, oh, well, I can just, sack this land and kill a non-basic. But you're also slowing down your own board position, technically. Also, I've seen many online streams where I've seen players get completely wrecked when your opponent drops like a Blood Moon or a Back to Basics. I mean, Back to Basics is horrible, but Blood Moon is just literally just ridiculous because everything is just tapping for red now. It's just like it's red, and you can't cast an Eldrazi spell with just red mana. So these are there to kind of work around it, where you drop Blood Moon, okay, I still have access to a colorless mana source, so I can still cast my stuff. And I can kind of be like, okay, you know, whatever, I'll just drop this in play and, you know, cast what I want. So here's your main deck for Eldrazi Stompy. Now I'm going to go ahead and clear this up and put the sideboard out. We'll go over the sideboard. Alright, now we're going to look at the sideboard for Eldrazi Stompy. Starting off on the high end of the mana cost on the sideboard, we have our 4 Phyrexian Revokers, which I'm thinking I'm probably going to do a video just on Phyrexian Revoker, how to utilize him in the Legacy format against various other decks. So obviously here's your dude that just, you know, can kill some activated abilities of chosen non-land cards. To make things even more fun, 3 Spheres of Resistance to make everything else cost 1 more. So once again, like White Stacks, like Mud, you are kind of a prison-based deck. You just have more aggro-based elements. I mean, normally in Mud you would go like Chalice, Thorn of Amethyst, and then Metalworker. That would be like your turn 3 play, you know, and I mean, it's a good play, but it has to survive to really be abused. Whereas here you could go like Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher, like some a more potent threat on turn 3. This just makes your turn 1 or 2 plays a bit stronger, giving you another 3 cards that can potentially just make everything cost more for your opponent. And because you're running 12 Saw lands, the increase in mana cost doesn't affect you as much. It's basically you're playing prison effects that are going to disproportionately affect your opponent more than it would you, basically. Which is why this deck can just abuse it a bit more than other decks that might think about playing it. Now, like Mud, White Stacks, you're running Saw lands in there, so it's a little bit different. Ratchet Bomb, one of the go-to ways, and for this deck, the only, unless you're going to run Oblivion Stone or Powder Keg or Nevinyrral's Disc, I would say this is the go-to mass removal unless you want to go with All Its Dust. Now, you could go with All Its Dust. It would basically just be 5 mana once an Eye is in play. If an Eye of Ugin's not in play, it's 7 mana. You know, All Its Dust would kill all, makes everybody sacrifice all colored permanents. Not a problem. This, however, you can utilize it a bit more in a way to target certain mana costs, like a certain, like, oh, we're only worried about this, like, 3 mana cost permanent, so you can work it up to that. Unlike Powder Keg, it's something you have to actively add the counter on. Powder Keg, it's always during your upkeep. It's not you may, it is you do. So you drop Powder Keg in play, it just will add a fuse counter. I think, now I'm starting to question myself. I think Powder Keg you have to add a fuse counter. I'll have to check. But with this, you can kind of get around, if I'm right on Powder Keg, you can just kind of just keep it at a certain mana cost until you need to blow it. Being colorless, and 2 mana cost just makes it a lot easier. Winter Orb. I myself put Winter Orb in because I figured I needed a way to abuse the taxing effects of Thorn of Amethyst and Sphere Resistance if I was really going to run them. the ability to just kind of force your opponent to play like 3 or 4 mana for a 1 mana cost spell, if Chalice isn't in play, is just hilarious. And then just a Winter Orb is just kind of like a kick in the teeth, where it's just like, yeah, you're only going to tap 1 land now, so have fun with that, buddy. Got our 4th copy of Warping Whale again. You know, 1 mana cost, or sorry, power and toughness 1 creatures. Exile them, or take out a sorcery. I myself never really had to put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion in play. I just never have. Maybe somebody out there has, you know, a surprise block or something like that. I could, you know, see it, but I've never done it. But the option's there. Okay. And then Tormod's Crypt. Seeing that I'm running the colorless version, we have white splashes that I've seen people run. They have like Rest in Peace on the board. I've seen black splashes people run where they got Leyline of the Void out there. Me being completely colorless, and the fact that you predominantly want to go Chalice of the Void at 1 makes Tormod's Crypt the best option for me for Graveyard Hate. Sorry, just yawning. It's relatively simple. Just, if you know, just drop it in play. If you have a Thorn or a Sphere in play, pay the mana cost, whatever, and then just crack it, nuke the graveyard. That's all. So here's the sideboard. I myself, I think Eldrazi Stompy is... I wouldn't go as far as saying it is a tier 1 build. It does have some amazing resources against other tier 1 decks, though. You know, the ability to go against, say, like a combo deck, or like a Delver build with lots of 1 mana cost spells, lots of Ponders, Brainstorms, Deathrite Shamans. It's just being able to go Chalice at 1, Thorn of Amethyst, then follow it up with Thought Not Seer, Reality Smasher. It's just a really just hits part of your deck so you can't cast it, then forces other spells to cost more, slows you down, and then hits you with just like 9 damage 2 turns later. So it can really just quickly overwhelm an opponent. I wouldn't go tier 1 yet. I'd go like, I don't know, like tier 1.5. You know, tier 1.5. You know, like my burn deck, Chalice at 1. That's like a third of my deck. You know, is just. I mean, well, if we're not counting, you know, land, that's basically half my deck that just gets countered. So like turn 1, I've already lost half my deck basically. So that's like really, you know, brutal to play against. So there's a lot that this deck can do. There's a lot of game. It's also, in my eyes, in Legacy, it's a new deck. It's also relatively unexplored, I would say. There's also other things that we could add to it, other things we could take away from it. In terms of matchups, I haven't tested it extensively. I haven't really, you know, ran it through the gauntlet, if you will. But it seems very promising. The Eldrazi creatures themselves are relatively cheap. You know, not one of them was over $5 a copy when I bought them. So it is a relatively cheap deck to build in terms of your creatures. I mean, the most expensive cards are going to be, if you're getting Cavern of Souls, obviously. That's going to cost you a lot. Then, of course, Chalice of the Void is going to cost you. But for the most part, you're only seeing a few key cards that are very, very expensive. With Eye being banned, with Eye of Ugin being banned in Modern, prices just bottomed out on that because, well, everybody's unloading it now, basically, because it's banned in Modern, so you can't play it. So I like it. I recommend it as a deck to potentially play in Legacy if you have a basic Legacy format. If you got some like weird, freaky Legacy format, I don't know. I really don't know. So, once again, it's Tristan Blaze with an Eldrazi Stompy deck tech. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more deck techs. And be sure to check out all my other, God knows how many I have already, Legacy deck techs on my channel. Peace.